Direct and impactful rich vs poor mindset. Eye-opening truths about wealth. This will change how you think about money. Robert Kiyosaki, an eye-opening interview. The most outdated idea is this: go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, get out of debt, and invest long-term in the stock market. But think about it. Why save money when governments are printing trillions of dollars? The wealth gap between the top 1% and the rest is enormous. It's not just about money. You have to step back and see the bigger picture. So, what should you do? Inside each of us, there's a poor person, a middle-class person, and a rich person. The poor mindset worries about survival. The middle-class mindset craves security, a steady paycheck, benefits, stability. And then there's the rich mindset. But it's not something we're taught. Instead, we're conditioned to go to school, get a job, and rely on a paycheck. If you've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you know my rich dad never paid me. He believed a paycheck was one of the most dangerous things to rely on. The moment you take one, you adopt an employee mindset. That drove my poor dad, who was a government worker, crazy. You have to pay people, he'd argue. But my rich dad wasn't against earning money. He just refused to be a slave to it. As an entrepreneur, if one business fails, I start another. I don't need a paycheck. I don't need someone to take care of me. If a government doesn't like me, I move somewhere that welcomes entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur isn't about owning a business. It's a mindset, a skill set, and a different set of rules. Small businesses don't operate under the same rules as big businesses. Employees and entrepreneurs think differently, act differently, and play by different rules. If I had to give advice to someone considering the leap into entrepreneurship, I'd share my own experience. I'll never forget my last paycheck. It was both the worst and best day of my life. I was in Puerto Rico, working at Xerox. My boss handed me a bonus check, about $30,000. It was exciting, but also unsettling. Then a colleague named John approached me and said, "You'll be back." "Why?" I asked. "Because you're going to fail," he replied. I looked at him and, well, let's just say I had some choice words. He had left Xerox, failed, and came crawling back. But I made a different choice. I refused to let fear dictate my future. That's the difference. I once said, "Look, you failed and came back. But if I fail, I'm never coming back." That's the mindset. See, if you think, well, if I fail, I'll just go back to mommy and daddy, then that's exactly what you'll do. Failure is what pushed me to become an entrepreneur, because I had no safety net. For years, I had no money, no paycheck. But that's exactly what my rich dad encouraged me to do. He said, when you don't have a paycheck, you get hungrier, smarter, and your character is tested. Will you become a crook? Dishonest? Will you cheat and steal? Or will you rise and become a better human being? That's the real benefit of being an entrepreneur. You discover who you really are when you have nothing. The problem is, too many people only focus on what's going to happen to me. Instead, you need to look at the big picture. When something bad happens, something good is around the corner, but only if you're prepared. If you think the next 20 years will be like the last 20, you're in for a rude awakening. Look, when we buy milk at the store, we always check the expiration date, right? But most people never check the expiration date on their mindset. Instead of avoiding debt, I use debt. I just refinanced $300 million in debt, from 5% to 2.5% interest. Now, every month, more money comes in because my cost of money went down. Yet, financial experts tell people to get out of debt. No, learn how to use debt. When I came back from Vietnam in 1973, the first thing my rich dad told me was, go to school to learn how to invest in real estate. It wasn't about real estate. It was about understanding debt and taxes. Debt and taxes make the rich richer. Debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. Even highly paid professionals, like doctors and lawyers, are getting crushed, and they don't even know why. A doctor recently told me, I finally made $1 million. I asked, how much did you pay in taxes? He said, $750,000. So he only kept $250,000. When I make $1 million, I keep $1 million. Because I don't work for money. If you work for money, you get taxed. That's why lesson number 1 in Rich Dad Poor Dad is, the rich don't work for money. Instead, we create businesses. That's how wealth is built. Banks make money by printing more of it. That's why I love banks. But while it's good for me, it's terrible for everyone else. When they print money, savers and workers suffer. The value of savings drops, and those who work for money get hit the hardest. On the other hand, debtors benefit. The rich use debt and taxes to grow wealthier, while the poor and middle class get squeezed. Outdated financial advice, like going to school, getting a job, working hard, saving money, paying off debt, and investing long-term, no longer works. The world changed in 1971 when President Nixon took the US off the gold standard, turning money into debt. Does this mean we should eliminate education? No. Education was once essential, but today, it's outdated. Moore's law states that information doubles every 18 months, making knowledge obsolete faster than ever. By the time you graduate, much of what you learned is already irrelevant. That's why I joke with my old Harvard friends. What they learned 50 years ago doesn't apply today. Banks now charge you to save money because they've printed too much of it. This excess cash creates stock and real estate bubbles, forcing people to dump cash before it loses value. That's why I say, savers are losers and cash is trash. Yet, many still chase high-paying jobs or try to get out of debt, both outdated ideas. Instead of avoiding debt, learn to use it to build wealth. Schools won't teach you about taxes, but the rich understand that when money is printed, two things happen: inflation and higher taxes. That's why the 1% keeps rising while the 99% struggle. The system is designed this way, unless you learn to play by different rules. I focus on real estate, not the stock market. As an entrepreneur, I have more control over my income, how much I make, and what I pay in taxes. Because I also invest in real estate, I pay zero tax. For example, if I make $1 million as an entrepreneur, I immediately invest it in real estate, and thanks to tax advantages, I get a 4-to-1 return. So, I invest $1 million in real estate and get $4 million in return. Now, any entrepreneur who thinks the key is just making money and starting a business needs to rethink things. It's not just about making a lot of money. Real entrepreneurs understand that. In the US, there are 28 million small business owners, and 24 million of them are solo entrepreneurs. They're called non-employee entrepreneurs, and many people don't fully understand what an entrepreneur actually does. Most of them are self-employed but not true entrepreneurs. Self-employed individuals often pay the highest taxes, and that's something no one talks about. This is what we call the entrepreneurial spirit, but what we're really discussing is something deeper. There's no such thing as a bad economy. We all live in an external economy, but we also have an internal economy. The key is the willpower to change your internal economy. I can see both the good and the bad in any situation, but I don't worry because I know I'll be successful regardless. A person with a poor personal economy will only see a bad economy because they don't know how to make money in any environment. A middle-class person, on the other hand, has a middle-class economy. Most people just want a nice house, a steady paycheck, a job, and a car. So when they lose that job, it feels like their world is falling apart. But for an entrepreneur, not having a traditional job is normal. It's not a disaster. What Bucky Fuller taught me is this: there are always two sides to everything. If you believe the economy is bad, it's probably because your personal economy is struggling. If you value steady employment above all, then you'll constantly fear a world without jobs. It's really about your economy versus the external economy, what you can control versus what you can't. Entrepreneurs focus inward. They develop an internal mindset. When they fall, they don't see failure. They see an opportunity to rise even higher. The average person falls and turns to escape, Prozac, blame, denial. But real entrepreneurs see mistakes for what they are: signs they didn't know something. They learn, adapt, grow. Every fall is fuel to go higher, stronger, smarter, and even happier. Those with weak internal focus fear loss so much that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They fear losing a job, and then they do. That's why the first and most important job of an entrepreneur is internal control. Not control over the outside world, but over their own thoughts, emotions, and choices. The moment you rely on a paycheck, you're choosing to be an employee. But if you want freedom, you've got to be stronger than that. You've got to own what's inside.